Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Productivity Mastery. As usual, we're going to bring you amazing guests. Every week, we're bringing you amazing guests from all around the world, different type of expertise, but all around leadership, productivity, entrepreneurship. How can we be better, show up better, and give the best of who we are, build great businesses? Today, I have a fascinating guest. His name is Matthew Brackett, and I don't even know where to start this conversation. We're going to be unpacking his story, his leadership lessons he learned on the way. But Matthew, why don't we start with the picture? Prior
Yeah.
to the podcast, you showed me this picture,
Okay.
and can you maybe share the story? Share with us the
Of
picture and share
course.
the story.
We'll do a little show and tell. So yeah, Matthew Brackett. I'm in Mexico City, and so what I'm going to tell you has a lot to do with Mexico. I went to a dinner in darkness. It's called, put on by a foundation that supports visually challenged or blind people, and they create this environment which is totally dark. In other words, you can't see your fingers in front of your face. And so we have this 3-course meal in darkness. And two things that it did for me, it enhances your other senses. So you kind of you hear more, you feel more, the sensations and also the flavor of the food that you don't know what you're eating. And so you're sort of trying to discover what you're eating. And you're talking to people. And then halfway through the meal, we had to put like a puzzle together between all of us, even though we couldn't see anything. And then it's part of it also is creating sensitivity or an awareness around what visually challenged or blind people go through. So that was sort of, and at the waiters, the people that served us and led us through the whole experience were blind people. And this is put on by a foundation called Ojos que Sienten, sort of eyes that feel. And part of the woman that started this foundation, she can see, but she's very sensitive towards people that are challenged in different ways from a very young age. She was like that. And so she started teaching photography to blind people. And from that, she started a foundation. And the picture that I showed you is a picture that was taken by a blind person. So they studied photography and they used their other senses to capture pictures. And so at the end of the meal, they auctioned off a few pictures. And so there's a picture that I bought to support the foundation. And also I have it here because it's a great story. It's impactful. And it's also just a beautiful picture of Mexican women in a very traditional town and traditional festivities in their dress. But the story behind it, I think, is very powerful. Just about how meeting these people, their energy, their joy, their appreciation for what they are, for who they are, for what they can do, and it's humbling for those of us, for me that I couldn't see. And I was like, well, these people have so much to teach me. And I'm sure a lot of us, we come across experiences like that very often in life, how people that seemingly have less teach us so much more.
And why was this story so impactful to you? So you decided to begin our conversation prior to the podcast sharing this story.
Why?
Why was it
Oh,
so important to you?
it's so important to me because of just precisely what I just said, is that people, oftentimes I can get very negative about myself or about life because entrepreneurship is challenging. But when you see these other people say, there's so much to be thankful for. And I was so thankful for meeting them and having that experience, because it helped me value my eyesight. And it was like, also now I can see, and I want to see better. And this has a lot to do even with my story and with the way I work with people. I want to see people better. And this is directly linked to leadership. When there's basic needs that we have as human beings, without going into physiological needs, but the human person, we all want to be seen. We want to be listened to. We want to be valued. We want to be appreciated. We want to be recognized. And when we do this in romantic relationships, when we do this in family and inner circles, And when we do this in the workplace, people are more content, there's more connection, people are happier, performance is better. And so this is so basic, and this is something that sometimes a lot of people miss out on. We jump to other things about leadership. If we can start there, we will be so far ahead of the game. Now, and this is based, for me, this is based on just the importance of the human person, the dignity of the human person. When we use people, well, we're not treating people with that dignity that they deserve and that they desire. Now, in the professional space, work is a professional transaction. I offer you my expertise or my services, my time, and you compensate that. So we have to start with that, because there's a big thing in today's workforce where, we're almost like employees expect the company to do everything for them and make them happy, well-being. So all that's important, but we have to remember it's a transaction, and it's a professional transaction. So professional is very important, but also it's a human transaction. People dealing with people. And to remember, people, they want to be seen, they want to be listened to. And if we think about that, and then if we think about my own senses, I can see people. Right? Oftentimes, dealing with these blind people, even though they couldn't see me, I felt like they could see me because of the way they dealt with me. And that can happen even, I think, even with deaf people. But we who have our senses, let's try to see better. Let's try to hear better. Okay? And value people better. That's why one of my motto in my own business is, let's lead better, love better, and live better. Because these are the wonderful things that we can do as human beings. And sadly, sometimes we fall short.
That was beautiful, man. Such a powerful reminder. Thank you so much for bringing this important topic to the front. People want to be seen. People want to be heard. People want to be appreciated in any kind of relationship, including at the workplace.
Right.
Many of the topics we explore here on the podcast are related to building a productive and caring culture, workplace. Right. And often we tend to focus a little bit too much on the more logical side of the things, the business results, the structure, the processes, the technical things, which are really important, but they shouldn't come at the expense on the human side,
right,
of building an environment that nurtures people.
That's right. Yeah, so that has, and I think that just has automatic consequence, positive results on performance, engagement, and therefore on well-being, where people are just more content. Because again, going back to that, when people feel seen, listened to, they're going to be more engaged. They're going to work better, right? It's very interesting that when I have a leader that I look up to, I'll almost do anything for that leader because I know that they'll do anything for me. But if I have a leader who comes across as selfish, comes across as just, very utilitarian, I'm going to hold back. Right? And when we talk about culture, I think culture is built on a few things. What values do we profess, and then how do our behaviors align with those values? When I work with a lot of organizations, that's why I use this sort of the gap between, this is what we say we stand for, but this is the way we behave. Right? The bigger the gap, the bigger the frustration and disappointment, and the more dysfunction the culture. Okay, and culture starts at the top. And I can't stress this enough, because a lot of executives and leaders are like, no, HR and our culture, but you take care of culture down at the bottom, and we're going to continue to be the same. Right? Culture starts at the top. Right? You can say you stand for certain things, but if leadership is behaving a different way, people are going to behave the way you're behaving, because that's what's acceptable. And then, so culture, another thing in leadership that's so important and for culture is clarity of communication. One of the greatest gifts that we can give our people, and this is applied also in family or romantic life, and also, but in business, one of the greatest gifts that we can give our people is clarity of communication. And this is hard for us as human beings. Sometimes we have a hard time being clear. And so this means clarity of mission and vision. Who are we? What do we stand for? Why do we do what we do? What are the values that we profess and live by? What do results look like? What are my expectations for you as an employee and as someone who works with me? And also and then feedback is a very important part of clarity of communication. People, as human beings, we all want to know where we stand. And we have a hard time with ambiguity. So if we don't know where we stand, we're left guessing, trying to figure it out. And so we're in that awkward dance. This happens in romantic relationships and that happens in the workplace. When it's awkward dance, is trying to figure out where we stand because no one's telling me. And I'm not only saying negative feedback, I'm saying positive. First and foremost, people, if we want to reinforce positive behaviors and promote positive behaviors, we have to let people know what we're appreciating and valuing about the way they're performing. And some leaders will say, no, they're just doing their job. I'm not going to highlight that. Yes, but if you want to promote positive behaviors, well, it's important to highlight what you're appreciating so that people will continue to do it. Like, again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. They realize that they're being seen. That even in the small things that they're doing well, someone's noticing. And that means a lot to us. And they will continue to do that. But if we're not saying that, people will, well, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to do. Maybe it's not appreciated. Or maybe people don't care. And then there's the negative feedback or areas of opportunity or growth opportunity, whatever you want to call it. But the fact is that we all want to know, well, not necessarily we want to know, we all need to know how we can improve because this is very directly linked to expectations. But if you're not telling us, if we're not telling our people, and this is how, and going back to what you said, a culture that cares. This is how we care for our people because one of the responsibilities of a leader, as I said, is clarity of communication. Another responsibility of a leader is to develop their people. And that's why this whole part of feedback is so important, positive and negative. Right? Now, we as human beings, we have a hard time with difficult conversations. We're like, oh, I don't know, how do I do this? And well, do it because you care. And when it comes from a place of care, be honest, be upfront. Right? Sometimes the people talk about the sandwich method. Right? Say something positive. Kind of put the negative feedback in the middle, and then say something positive. I'm not a huge fan of that because while you're saying something positive, the person is really waiting for you to say, but what I wanted to tell you is, and so they're really not paying attention to the positive. People. So if the people are they already know you've called them into the office or you're at a performance meeting and they're waiting for the areas of opportunity. So sometimes, after you get over the pleasantries, lead with the areas of opportunities. And then spend more also then at the end of the part to talk about all the things that you're evaluating, that you're appreciating, that you want to continue to promote, these positive behaviors. And because I think that the danger there of beginning with the negative feedback or beginning with the positives is that people they're not listening. They're waiting for the meat of the sandwich. And so think about how to present that. Anyways, I started going off on a tangent there. But this is
Matthew, can I share something?
yes.
I feel like you're the third co-author of our book. Like literally, like if you open the book that we've written, it's called Perform: The Unsexy Truth About Startup Success. I co-authored the book with Cristobal Alonso, who's the CEO of Startup Wise Guys, the leading European startup acceleration program.
Oh,
Um, if you read the book, what you just described in the past 5 minutes is pretty much a summary of our book, like
there we
like
go.
like 95%, which is like I'm getting goosebumps because this is the core of everything. And just to for those of you listening, if you haven't came across our framework, it's Perform stands for purpose and values, effective planning, roles and responsibilities, focus and execution, optimal energy, robust communication, mental toughness. The 7 core pillars
Look at that.
that if you pay attention to these pillars consistently as a leader, and a lot of the things that me and Matthew talk about, you, the listener, you know them. I know them. Matthew knows them. But how much do you do them consistently? How much do you provide clarity for every person from your team, what
Mm,
their priorities should be? What are their core responsibilities? What do you expect from them? How often do you make the time to give feedback,
right.
to provide the feedback in an effective way? And it could be hard, right? Because you're busy. You have so many things to do. But these are priorities. These should be priorities for every effective leader. It's not just the right thing to do because we are good human beings. It is actually effective for your business.
It is. It's effective for the bottom line, for results, for production, all that.
Matthew, I
Thank you.
wanna I wanna
I want before you continue, I want to say something about this because in two of the things that I do, I recommend with a lot of the mid and senior leadership that I deal with is, um, I really encourage them, and they start to implement it, that they have fixed meetings with their people, especially with their direct reports. This sounds like a no-brainer, but sometimes people they think they don't have the time to do it. But this is great for preventive maintenance. It's great for that people know that I have time with my boss, and so all the things that I need to talk to. In the end, I think it ends up saving time, and it ends up keeping things moving in the right direction rather than trying to pick up the pieces after. Right? It keeps you, as a leader, you have to stay one step ahead of the game. So calendarized, programmed meetings with my direct reports or with other areas that are important to me, put them in your calendar and let them be fixtures that you build your life around, that you build your professional life around. The other thing that I do, in coaching, and you've probably experienced this, but in my individual coaching and consultation, calls, what's so important, it forces people, impactful, high performing influencers and leaders, it forces them to slow down. And this is, oftentimes we think we don't have time to slow down. But when we don't slow down, then we're not, to support your point, we're not paying attention to our priorities. So in our coaching, so these coaching sessions, it forces people to slow down for 45 minutes, where they begin to pay attention to what's going on around them, to the priorities, and they pay attention to what's going on inside of them. And this improves, indirectly, it improves self-awareness. And I say that self-awareness is one of the greatest leadership assets, and the lack of self-awareness, one of the greatest leadership liabilities. And a lot of people or leaders will say, that can't be that important. Well, if the more blind spots you have, the more perhaps dysfunctional or ineffective your leadership will be. So the less blind spots you have, and self-awareness is all about uncovering those blind spots, bringing up the stuff. And not only that, then improved self-awareness also improves my ability to be aware of those around me, directly linked to emotional and social intelligence. So that's why that's one reason why coaching sessions can be so helpful for you. And it's not because the coach knows better. Oftentimes the coach doesn't. I'm not an expert in Stoyan. I'm not an expert in what you do. You are. But as a coach, I facilitate a process of discovery. So anyways, there we go. I know you were going to go somewhere else with this. Where do you want to go?
That's a very important point. And while you're speaking, it just to my mind came this quote. I don't know where it came from, but I'm gonna read it. I just wrote it on my phone.
Yes.
As a business leader, don't forget the business of people.
Yes.
I just came up with it while we were
Thank you.
speaking. So you
All
brought
right.
it to me somehow.
Take care of your people, and your people are going to take very good care of you and of your business. Take care of your priorities, and your priorities are going to take good care of you.
And talking about people and loving
Yeah.
people, I wonder whether this love for people and faith in people came to you through your experience as a priest. Can you maybe talk about that? Why did you become a priest, and what did you learn about leadership being a
Right.
priest?
So much. There's so much there. So yeah. So for your audience, I'm I'm the 10th of 13 children from a small town in New England, and I left small town New England at the age of 18 to on a partly I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, so that's why I left. And I knew I didn't want to stay there.
Which town is that?
It's a small town called Harvard, Massachusetts. It's the
Okay.
same name as the university, but
Is that close to? No, it's not. Is it east or west of Boston?
it's central. It's east, so it's central Massachusetts. West,
Central
west of
Boston.
Boston. There's nothing east of Boston, just the ocean. But yeah, it's in the
Well, this
central.
Cape Cod. This Cape Cod. I
Oh,
used
is it?
to live in on Cape Cod actually. I spent a
All
couple of
right.
summers in Cape Cod,
Oh,
so I was
nice.
wondering
Okay.
if you say Harwich or, but
No, no,
no,
no,
no.
no. Yeah.
Okay.
Central Massachusetts, very small.
Mm.
Those typical small New England towns with the colonial houses and
Got it.
church.
Got it. So
Church.
it's like I don't want to stay here. I want to go
You're
out
right. Well, I
and
did.
leave.
Yeah. I'm from a large family. Being that, I was like, I want to do something. And since I grew up in a very faith-based environment, I was like, I want to do something meaningful, impactful, something that lasts not only in time but in the afterlife and eternity. But at the same time, I didn't know what, and so I said I saw this joining this religious organization and to become a priest. I saw that as well. This is meaningful. This requires heroism, and we were brought up knowing that heroism is important, sacrifice is important. And so I said, well, this is hard. This seems heroic and extreme, and so that's must be my path. So that's what I did, and that's where I was for 30.
How old
That's
were
where I
you
was
when
for 30 years. I was 18.
you were 18?
18. So that's
Wow.
what I did. So I went on that journey, and I didn't look back probably for about 25 years. And then I began to look. I was like, oh boy, what this in transformational moments in life or transition moments, I say that they can come to us through three different doors: through the door of love, through the door of dreams, or through the door of pain. And I think it was dreams and love that led me to do what I did, but then it was the door of pain that led me to question and say, well, is this the right place for me? And for a lot of different reasons, you know, short of living in conflict with myself, somewhat of conflict with the human side of the organization. And I'm not saying that all that justifies, the decision I made. I'm just sort of saying why. But then it was it was also about my health. I was burnt out. I was going through years of depression, of mild depression. But again, that when you don't take care of it, it's obviously going to get worse. And I think part of just living in conflict and sort of like putting on, I think I lost, what I would say is I lost myself in the process, because it's all about identity is so important for us as human beings. And I was living all these identities from a very early age. I was put in very important leadership roles. So, I had the collar, I was the priest, I was this, I was that. But who was I? And if we don't have this strong foundation of who we are as human beings, if my identity is I'm the speaker, I'm the boss, I'm the CEO, this is what, right, or I'm the military, or at some point I'm gonna get a costly bill, and it's gonna cost me some of my priorities.
And
So,
one of the things about the importance of coaching is exactly this self-awareness that you create, because sometimes it's very difficult for somebody to really distinguish between what are my own values and beliefs and what are the values and beliefs that I picked on the way, perhaps from my upbringing, perhaps from my teachers, the school, my peer group, and which of those values and beliefs I subconsciously still follow, as opposed to going deeper and looking inside of who am I really and what makes me happy, what makes me who I am.
yes, who am I? Like you said, who am I? How do I align? To live in alignment with who we are is really important, because when we live in contradiction or in conflict, it begins to wear us out emotionally, right? Mentally, psychologically, spiritually, right? And over time, that can really take. Now, again, personality styles are different. I think I'm sort of a forward thinker, and when you're in highly structured, hierarchical organizations, I began to realize I was just living kind of like always running into a wall, right? Because you want to make changes, you want things to be different, you want things to be better, but these large organizations, and I'm not saying just the Catholic Church or religious orders. I come across this in very large global organizations that I work with, that I coach some of the leaders in, and some people live frustrated because the organization is this big monster and they can't effect change. Some people are okay with that. So I think part of it's personality style. Other people can't do it. And then it's sort of like, well, then they have to make a decision. This isn't a place for me if it doesn't really align properly, and if I feel like I'm just wearing myself out, or I choose just to be just to submit and to be passive, and just get the paycheck, do the job, and not ruffle feathers. And in large organizations, a lot of people choose to do that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Everyone has to find the way to make it work for our own well-being, right? For the well-being of our loved ones. So anyway, that's I forget where I was going with this, but that was what led to my decisions, and so I mean I did some, I made mistakes along the way. And I think when I was just not in a good mental state, you can make mistakes. Again, this is a great important thing for entrepreneurs, leaders. Okay, if we don't take care of ourselves, we do run the risk of making poor decisions, right? That will affect us, affect our organization, affect the people that we lead. And it doesn't come from a place of ill will, but it's just a natural consequence. So at one point, I raised my little white flag and I said, you know what? Time out, right? And so I took a sabbatical year. I went into inpatient care for 4 months to really deal with a lot of stuff that I was carrying for a number of years. I was in a crisis, and I'm very passionate about crisis. Crisis is a hard word for us as human beings, but we will all face them. And crises can be transformational when we face them in a proper way.
Matthew, I'm gonna pause here because probably there's 6 or 7 places I want to zoom in a little bit from the
Right.
story that you shared. And the first part is for my audience, for myself. I think it's going to be really interesting to hear a little bit more about your life as a priest. And
Uh-huh.
and this podcast is called Productivity Mastery. People want to learn how to be productive. So how was a regular week of yours looking like so you can perform as an effective priest? What does a effective priest mean to you? And how did you prepare? Because a lot of the part about productivity comes with preparation.
Yes. So we 10 years of preparation. People don't realize this. It depends. 8 to 12 years of preparation to become a priest. And because of the
What does
academic.
that include? What does that include? Like what like how do you
So I
practice? What do you do to become a great priest?
Right. So I went through 2 years of novitiate, which is really like 2 years of boot camp. If we think of the United States military, right? It's usually 3 or 4 months of boot camp, 2 years of intense physical and spiritual and mental boot camp, where you step away from the world. It's focused a lot on silence, on prayer, on connection with the transcendent, on getting to know yourself better. Also, there's some academics in there, but it's really learning about the spiritual life, about how our spirit works, and how we connect with the transcendent, we call God, how God connects to us as human beings, how to foster that relationship. And then, we studied Latin, we studied Greek, and we studied, then we went on to classical humanities. Then you get a bachelor's in philosophy. Then we do some hands-on ministry work for a few years. It's also part of the growth process, part of the discernment process to understand if this is what I want to do. And then we do 3 years of theology. So it's a very, extensive process. And then ministry brought me to, I was in Italy for 10 years in different periods of my life. I was in Colombia, South America, and Chile, and also in Ireland. And then it brought me also to the Navy as a naval chaplain.
Just hold on a second. So we're gonna get there. But what were your core objectives on a weekly basis as a
Right.
priest?
Yeah. So as a priest, first of all, there's logistics, there's practical side, and then there's the what I would call the spiritual side. First of all, it's important as a priest, to religious figure, to stay connected to my mission, which is first and foremost to be connected to God and to be a bridge between God and others, to be an instrument that leads people to that encounter with themselves, and that encounter with themselves in the light of the divine, in the light of God. So the first duty of a priest is the spiritual duty, to pray, to meditate, to stay connected, to be the best instrument that you can be. And then therefore, then the other element is then that teaching, preaching element, how to transmit the word, whether it be, in our case, would be scripture, or teachings of the church. In other religions, there would be other based foundational documents. But how do we transmit this to people in a nourishing way? Because this is food for the spirit. And it's not only food for the spirit, but it's also how to apply that to your life. Now, I could go on a tangent on how oftentimes
I think
we people
that's
don't
such
do
a
this work.
mm,
But yes,
I think that's such a there's so many learnings for not only people who are priests or doing something in this area, but for, let's say, leaders, entrepreneurs.
definitely.
Like there's a few things I just want to point out.
Sure.
One, you learned that in order to be in your best possible state, you need to have your core practices and you need to be consistent with them.
Yes.
And I think this could be a great learning for anybody listening. It's about doing the things over and over again. I mean, if you just prayed once for 5 hours and then it's like, I already prayed. And next
Right.
month I'm not praying. I'm done. I know how to pray. It's probably not going to go so well.
That's right. That's right. It's a practice, like in many things, exercise, go to the gym, sports, anything, and we eat on a regular basis, don't we? Right? Because we want to nourish. Right? And if we believe that we have a spirit, and so well, we want to nourish the spirit and soul. So as you said, there's like this core, when I talk to people, it's like, you can usually name it on one hand. What are the core behaviors or habits that help you to show up your best? And for us, in religious life, yes, so an hour of silent meditation every morning, right? Plus other formal prayers that we would have to do, whether it be liturgical, like what is called Catholic Mass, what is called the breviary, right? And then another hour of prayer throughout the day, broken into different periods. 8 days of silent retreat every year, and at one or two points in our life to do 30 days of silent retreat. So yeah, so it's, and I think there's a book out there about Lessons of a Monk, right, which by a very famous speaker and author, and it speaks to people because they're fascinated by that lifestyle, this sort of like this mysterious lifestyle of a monk or of a priest, but there's so many lessons for any human being in our daily life of why those practices become the foundation of what you build your day around. Then what else? Now it depends on what your job is as a priest. But I worked in directing seminaries, so a lot of my day was running, just logistics and also making sure that our values, our vision, our mission, that I'm consistently teaching that, and that I'm teaching people about how to encounter themselves, how to encounter God, and how to be the best religious person and priest that they can be when they reach that stage.
Man,
So
isn't that exactly what we were speaking about at the beginning of the podcast?
it
Like
is,
you
yes.
you show up, you identify your core priorities and what are the practices that get you into your best possible state so you can show up as a leader and guide others and lead others. And then one of your core priorities is not only to have the best of intentions for yourself and be self-aware, but to be able to transmit this message and empower others, influence others, lead others. The power of communication, being influential as a leader. Because if you don't have people around you, you can be a leader, but you can be a lonely leader. And
Right.
there's many tech founders out there that are exceptional genius in product, in tech, in many other things. And they're like, I'm just not a people person. But maybe you have to learn. Maybe you have to learn to be better in communication. You don't have to be extroverted, super upfront kind of person. No, I mentioned many of the best leaders out there are very introverted,
Hmm.
but
Yes,
they're impactful.
that's right. Yes, and if you're not and if you're not interested in leading people, then get someone on your team that can do that for you, so you can stay in your zone of genius of technology, right? But it is interesting in the hierarchical process of promotion and traditional processes. People that are good in their technical abilities oftentimes are the ones that get promoted, and that's sometimes where we make mistakes because they're not the right person, or let's promote you, but let's also give you the training and education and accompaniment so that you can learn how to lead people better. So my job, that was, that's what I did. I ran organizations, but also in some, in Colombia and in Ireland and England, I was also the national director of our operations. And so I wore a few hats, overworked, underpaid. We think about poverty, so actually we don't get paid. And so, and that's where burnout sort of came from, that and from some other things.
How
And I
old were
didn't.
you at the time? How old were you?
Um I was about, at that stage, probably about 38.
Mm.
And there was, and I'm going to talk mistakes that I made. Mistakes that I over that time was, over those years, was I lost. While I knew a lot about myself, I also lost connection with my emotional side,
Mm.
because we didn't give a lot of importance to that, as oftentimes men don't, right? And in
Let's
certain
stay
stage,
here. Let's stay here for a
yeah.
second. So, losing connection with your emotions, in what way?
Okay, let me back up for a sec. So, feelings and emotions can sometimes be equalized to maybe not important. And I was in part of an organization, and a faith-based organization, that sort of didn't give importance to them, right? There's a tendency in some areas where we over spiritualize. And we can do this as human beings in different ways. It's called their defense mechanisms, right? To try to make sense of things. And so the way we made sense of negative emotions and feelings was, well, this is a trial, this is purification, this is the cross, whatever you want to call it, right? And so I'm just meant to suck it up and to figure it out, right? Um, and so what happens, that leads you to disconnect from certain elements. I disconnected from certain elements of myself because I didn't know how to name those things. I didn't know how to deal with them. I didn't know what to deal with them. And in a certain way, it was like, those aren't good, so don't even talk about them. And this can happen in order. I know when I'm working at the military, this was also a common thing that I saw in the military. And so I don't think it's something that I learned a lot growing up, but then it was just reinforced being in this organization. Now, you asked, how did that happen? Or what did you ask?
Yeah, how did you lose connection with your emotions?
There's something, I think it was something that I didn't learn. It was something also in the environment that didn't promote it. It didn't give us permission to deal with those things. Often there was a few times when I wanted to talk about them, and I was sort of shut down,
Mm.
right? Or, don't pay attention to those.
So you
Or,
stuck them up inside.
yeah, you start to
Mm.
repress them and not deal with them. Another thing is, from an early age in this organization, I was given leadership roles. So I was really charged from an early age to take care of other people, which I did very well. But that gave me an excuse not to deal with my stuff.
Mm. Who is taking care of the leader?
Right. Right. And they're like, well, I'm good at taking care of other people. The less I deal with my own stuff, then the better I'm going to be. But
You
again,
find stuff to be busy with, so you
right.
can focus on being there for others. Maybe feel a little bit better about yourself because you help others, you support others, but then you avoid
Hmm.
looking
Yes.
inside and actually dealing with the stuff.
Yes. And that's the exact pattern.
Mm.
Right? And they can talk about, sometimes they talk about the functional depressed person is someone who is somewhat depressed inside, but they overwork themselves. They're always busy. They're always funny, making jokes about everything. In other words, we try to fill those holes, or try to facade what we're going through. We put on this facade of, I'm always busy, I'm always taking care of other people, I'm all overcommitting, or I'm always funny and have a good sense of humor, I'm always socializing. I'm not saying that any of that's negative. But if that's a facade behind which I can hide some of the deeper truths about myself, then at some point, that as I said before, that will send a bill.
So what happened afterwards? Was that the motivation for you to join the US Navy?
So no, so I took a year off. I did a lot of work on myself. At this point, that was in those years of working on myself, was the first time that if I can use this expression, I had the courage to put this huge decision on the table. And like, his formal ministry, is the priesthood the right place for me? It
Man,
was,
by the way, for those of you listening, these are a lot of years of your life that you've been doing that. You probably became part of your identity. It's
Very
not a
much
year
so.
or two.
Oh,
It's
no,
probably
it's
so
huge.
hard, man.
In priestly life, as with a lot of some organizations, it's not just a 9 to 5 job. It's a mission.
Hmm.
It's an identity. It's 24/7. I didn't rest, have a vacation, didn't disconnect from my what we call professional life for 25 years. That's because that's the commitment, and that's something that I was passionate about because I was totally committed to serving God and to serving other people. But I'm not highlighting. I'm not saying that's a positive thing in the sense that not taking care of myself. It was just the nature of the organization, the nature of what was expected, and again, it ends up leading to a lot of difficulties and pain that I had to deal with. And part of my story is very important is how I befriended pain. As human beings, we don't like pain. We don't like discomfort. Right. And that's why we avoid it. That's why we want to put it away into a little closet. We want to, but some things, some pain and discomfort and difficulties or experiences or trauma, when we put it into darkness, hoping it will disappear, it grows. And no matter how much we try to, it's gonna grow, and its stench will begin to invade. Sort of, it will poison our life and how we live or how we come across, even unconsciously. But anyway, so I took that year off to do a lot of work on myself and to consider this big decision. I was very afraid to make that decision because it not only it was a place that I never wanted to be in my life. When I started my journey, I was like, I never want to be one of the people that walks away. I never want to be one of a priest that is unfaithful. I don't want to be a priest who looks depressed, right? Who has problems, right? And I became all of this. And so
What made you get to the point of no return? That it's like, despite all the pain, I'm
right,
doing it.
I'm making this decision.
I'm making this. I'm making a
I
move.
was, yeah, I just took me time. I needed a few years to work through it. I had to reconcile a lot of things theologically, spiritually, psychologically, mentally, emotionally,
Mm.
humanly, socially, because my decision affects a lot of people, beginning with family and extended circles, and thousands of people that I worked with, that I ministered to in my life in different countries. And that meant a lot to me because people are important to me.
Mm.
But I also, there's some codependency traits that I had. There's this sort of, this the pleaser traits that I had. And so all that gets mixed in there in the making this decision more difficult. Right.
So,
And
so what would
so,
be what would be a recommendation? Like, there's a lot of listeners right now that are maybe reflecting on their own stories and maybe resonating with some of the examples that you share. What would be your recommendation and advice in terms of what would be the first step they should do if they want to make a change?
if they want to make a change in their life, don't make that decision alone. I learned through pain and discomfort, I had to lean on other people. And that was hard for me because I had sort of built up this, I was good at what I did. I became a little bit self-sufficient, and that's not a healthy thing for us as human beings. A healthy independence is good, right? But if we become very self-referential, well, it's not, and it's hard for us is to bring someone in, especially into those intimate, vulnerable spaces. But it's so interesting, Stoyan, when as human beings, one of the ways that we process that, when we have thoughts, when we have experiences, when we have emotions, one of the ways, basic ways that we process this as human beings is when we transform it into words, whether it be writing or whether it be speaking. So trying to do things on our own, we're not fully processing what we're going through. That's why having someone in a confidential, safe space, that we can talk about stuff and process what we're feeling, what we're going through, why things are difficult, why I don't want to do what I have to do, or why I do want to do what I have to do. Those conflicting or paradoxes that we experience in us as human beings. We need someone through which where we can mirror ourselves. Now, this is hard for us as human beings, and it's more hard for us. And I don't want to generalize, but yes, as males, it's harder for us to invite someone into that space. We would prefer to do it on our own, as I wanted to do it on my own, but I was at such a low spot that I had to eat humble pie and say, no, I can't do this on my own. And if I want to, I had a bigger picture of, I want to live a good life. I want to be successful. I want to continue to serve people. So if I don't deal with this, I won't be able to do any of that. And not only that, there were many moments in those years that I just did not want to live. I wouldn't say that I was considering how to take my life, but I was in such darkness and pain. I was like, I wish I was not alive because I don't know what to do. I'm so confused. And so going back to your question, invite someone into that space because that's how you're going to process it. As human beings, we are mysteries for ourselves. And part of how we uncover the mystery is through talking to another human being. Through the eyes of Stoyan, through you, I get to know more about myself. Through how you mirror back to me, through how the questions that you ask, through your affirmation, your validation, through your understanding, through your empathy, there's a connection and I get to know more about myself. And so these are things that we can't do on our own. So that would be my first recommendation.
Thank you so much, man. And we have a beautiful question coming from Marie, who's listening to the podcast live. Marie,
Oh
thank you
boy.
for being with us. So basically, she's stating the part of mission based business is something a lot of startups are struggling with. How do you get out of your own head and see what the problem is?
Yeah. It's so, and thank you for that, Murray. Yeah, thank you for that. Part of the thing is, even though we are experts in our business or whatever we do, oftentimes, like I said, we need the other person to help us get out of our head. I need to talk about things